Hello, I'm Jo Fay, and this is a SwissInfo podcast. SwissInfo is the multilingual and international public media company of Switzerland. Rocket building used to be the sole preserve of spacefaring nations like the United States or Russia. But now, many other players are getting involved, from private companies to young researchers, even from Switzerland. Today on the Swiss Connection, we're talking to students who are developing their own rocket systems. The trend in space travel is moving towards reusable rockets. In Switzerland, student projects are driving this development forward. Our science and video journalist Michele Andina went to have a look at two projects earlier this year.
Also, als erstes Fallschirm rausnehmen.
We're in a hangar in Dübendorf near Zurich, right next to a Swiss Armed Forces airfield. It's the workspace of ARIS, a space project led by students and supported by several institutes and universities, such as the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. Several rockets measuring from 1 to 4 meters are lined up in a row. Felix Hartwig and Matteo Vass are spending their spare time here, working on a reusable rocket with a parachute recovery system.
Matteo, you're responsible for the recovery system. How does it work in general?
Yeah, so the recovery system, its main goal is to bring the rocket back in one piece after it flies. And what we do is we have two parachutes, so it's a parachute-based system. We have one small parachute that initially deploys to slow the rocket down once it reaches its highest point in the flight. And then at about 800 meters above the ground, the bigger parachute comes out, which is a steerable parachute, a ram air so-called. And we can control that using motors, and we have an autonomous software system that tries to guide the rocket back to a designated landing point.
So what is the challenge with this system?
The main challenge that we have faced or that we have worked on this year was especially controls perspective. So how do we autonomously control a system that we have no influence on during the flight? So how does the controller and the guidance decide what inputs does it give to the motors so that it steers the parachute into the right direction? This is quite hard because it's easy to destabilize a parachute. So if you pull too much on one line, then the parachute collapses and you crash. Or if you pull too little, then you don't do enough turns, and so you don't get to the point where you wanna land. So it's a difficult trade-off.
To test their parachute recovery system, they're dropping it from a helicopter.
So you drop the rocket from a helicopter. In which areas you do that?
We do that in collaboration with the Swiss military. We have helicopters from the Swiss Air Force which allow us to drop it, and we do it on shooting ranges of the Swiss military. So we have done it in Wichlen once, which is in Glarus, and then we've also done it in Gatmen, which is in the Berner Oberland. There are just areas that the Swiss military can close to the public so that it's safe to do a test of this scale there.
But the Nicollier rocket can do more. Team leader Felix Hartwig shows us some other features the students are working on.
We have air brakes, which are metal plates which vertically come outside the rocket. They can be extended using an electromotor, and with this we can brake the airstream around the rocket and thus slow the rocket down. In spaceflight, it's important to not just hit somewhere in the sky, but you want to hit a very precise apogee, for example. So this is able to, we overshoot a little bit with the motor, and then we slow ourselves down with the air brakes so we can have a as precise as possible apogee.
They've also developed an onboard computer to steer all the functions. It's a stack made up of individual circuit boards that can easily be exchanged.
Very few people in the team have built rockets before, so the structures people need to learn how they work with carbon fiber, how they can machine the metal parts, how can they design even the parts, how can they design parts that work well together. In the avionics sub-team we had to design our own PCBs.
PCBs, that's short for printed circuit boards.
And solder them, also learn how to solder, how to write firmware for the different PCBs and the flight computer.
The students here are real space aficionados who work on those projects in their free time.
Once I heard of ARIS, I think it was in my first year of the studies, I immediately thought it was a great idea and also a good chance to apply the theory that we learn in the classroom at ETH. It's really a great opportunity to apply and do some hands-on work here.
At the moment we have 43 active members, and then we have, I think, 7 coaches, and of course a lot of alumni, a lot of people that help us permanently. Yeah, and we all do it as freelancing. We don't get money, we don't get credit points, and just the pure motivation to do rocketry, to do what we love. So yeah, we do it in our free time, spend a lot of time here, but it's amazing.
I have to say the first drop test that I witnessed, when you just see the rocket hanging at the helicopter and then you hear the countdown and then it drops and there's like a few seconds where nothing happens and then the parachute comes out, it's like a huge relief. And then to even see it steer itself successfully, like exactly as we wanted, that was just amazing. And it was like 8 months of work leading up to that moment. So it was a really, really great moment, yeah.
3, 2, 1.
At the same time, another group of students in Gruyère is making their rocket ready for a test launch. It's also a reusable rocket system, but one that can land on its own. Like ARIS in Dübendorf, the Gruyère space program is also only made up of students. Julie Burning is studying robotics.
Avec cette fusée, on va pas aller dans l'espace.
We won't go to space with this rocket. Our goal is to demonstrate for the first time in Europe that we are capable of carrying a payload and landing a rocket. It's the technology used by SpaceX. That's how they revolutionized the space industry. And we, as a small group of students, want to demonstrate that we are also capable of doing this on a small scale.
À petite échelle. Il y a 2 défis techniques principaux sur cette fusée, le moteur.
There are 2 main technical challenges on this rocket. The engine is a bi-liquid rocket engine. It's an engine that takes 2 propellants to start an explosion to generate the flame. This is a real challenge in the space industry.
Et le deuxième, c'est tout ce qui est algorithme de contrôle.
The second challenge is everything that has to do with control algorithms. Making sure that the rocket autonomously holds itself upright and is able to land gently without smashing into the ground. We're testing all our algorithms and sensors beforehand on a drone. Everything to do with guidance, navigation, and control can be tested on a drone without having to worry about safety issues.
Notre GNC.
The rocket measures about 2.5 meters and weighs 100 kilograms. At this stage, for security reasons, the rocket stays attached to a crane during test launches.
Alors, for the moment, we have the crane to ensure the safety aspects.
This is Simon Bott, who works on the rocket's structure and engine.
Ça nous permet de faire des lancements proches. It allows us to launch close to our workshop, but it does limit us in terms of height. The maximum height we're allowed to reach legally is about 100 meters. Otherwise, the administration gets more complicated, so we're not going to try to go any higher, but we'd like to do a free flight at some point. That would be a great highlight for this project.
Ce serait vraiment un aboutissement pour ce projet.
Today the rocket will only go up a few meters. After the rocket is set up and all the parts are connected, it's time to fill it up with fuel. Julie and her colleagues are setting up a control stand with tables for computers 100 meters away from the rocket. The flight is recorded with cameras from various angles, as well as by drone. We all put in some earplugs, and then it's time for the launch.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1...
The rocket lifts off and hovers a few meters above the ground for a while. Then it performs a controlled move to the side and finally lands safely again.
Yes! Ah, parfait. Coupe l'enregistrement des données.
Everything went according to plan. I asked Jérémy Marciac, who worked on the rocket's control systems, how safe this is and whether they had to follow any regulations.
Bon, ce qui est marrant, c'est que dans la loi suisse, rien nous interdit de faire une fusée de ce genre.
Well, the funny thing is that under Swiss law, there's nothing that prohibits us from making such a rocket because nobody's tried yet. We looked at the risks though. If the rocket explodes, there are lots of fragments that will fly off. And for that, there are standards that enable us to calculate the safety distances. This is the first for a rocket made by students. Even in Europe, it's the biggest rocket ever made, which lands vertically. The Ariane Group and other big actors have not yet made a rocket of this kind.
Ariane Group ou ces gros acteurs n'ont pas encore fait de fusée de ce genre.
The participants are students in robotics, mechanical engineering and other related fields. But their passion for rockets started long before their time at university.
On se connaît tous depuis plus de 10 ans maintenant.
We've all known each other for over 10 years now. There were 5 of us for a very long time. Now we've been joined by lots of enthusiasts from our school and elsewhere.
Travailler sur ce projet.
À la base, ça venait des premiers atterrissages de SpaceX.
My passion started when seeing the first landings of SpaceX. I don't know if you've ever seen them land at sea. I remember seeing that for the first time, and I said to myself, I want to do the same thing. So we ended up with this rocket. I think everyone's caught the same bug.
Un peu fait piquer par la même guêpe.
That was a report from our science journalists Christian Raaflaub and Michele Andina. Michele, I watched the video that you made about these projects and I was really impressed to see really how professional this all looks. They use cranes, they've got helicopters, for goodness sake, and they're even collaborating with the Swiss military. It was quite difficult to believe the first time I heard this, that these projects are really only run by students.
Indeed, it goes without saying that this all costs quite a lot of money. So there are, of course, several sponsors behind these projects. And I was also impressed by these students' passion. I'd like to share a little personal story here, if I may.
Please do.
My father has been a big space fan for all his life. He's in his early 80s now. And he was 16 when the first moon landing took place, and he got hooked. He then studied mechanical engineering with the aim to go into rocket building. The industry did not quite take off as he and others had hoped at the time, and so he ended up working in other fields. Seeing these students, it made me think that he would have absolutely loved working on such a project, but he was 2 generations too early.
Nice story, Michele. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It really made me think about the different kind of opportunities that can develop over time, even in a country like Switzerland, as we said earlier, that you really wouldn't traditionally associate with anything to do with space and technology like that. Yeah, he was just too soon for his times. Thank you very much, Michele. You can find out more on this story on our website. Go to swissinfo.ch and search for Student Rocket Research. We have an article by Christian and the video I just mentioned by Michele, where you can see what these rockets and the launch look like. And if you liked what you heard today, don't forget to leave our podcast a 5-star review. Next week, we'll take you to a demolition site of an old paper factory to look at a new method of storing CO2 inside recycled concrete. Today's episode was recorded and edited by our science and video journalist Michele Andina. For more content, visit our website swissinfo.ch. I'm Jo Fay. Thanks for listening.
Hello, I'm Imogen Folks from Swiss Info's Inside Geneva podcast. On February 24th, 2022, Russia attacked Ukraine. The invasion caused Europe's largest refugee crisis since World War II. And during the year-long conflict, tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of people, soldiers and civilians, have been killed. Over the past year, a number of episodes of Inside Geneva have looked at the heavy humanitarian toll of the war and its wider implications for the world. We've been joined by historians and international human rights experts to ask about the background to the invasion. We've talked to major UN aid agencies about how the war in Ukraine is impacting other humanitarian crises, and we've asked if sanctions or war crimes investigations can stop or at least limit this conflict. If you're particularly concerned by the war in Ukraine, do listen to these episodes. You can find Inside Geneva free to listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, and all your usual podcast apps.